Tony Romo, this goes back to being an athlete and being a successful athlete. And I've heard it many times before, but I heard it most recently, Rich Paul said it, LeBron's guy. And he said it in a derogatory fashion, talking about Ben Simmons. But, some people get to the mountaintop and they just want to climb right back down. And I think that Tony Romo, in his football career and in his broadcasting career, is a great example of that. Here's a guy, one AA product, right? Clearly had the fire in his belly to do whatever it took to make an NFL roster, and then had God-given tools that allowed him, with the hard work and with the moxie. The guy's a sick athlete, and he's got great poise. I think some of that is just God-given. And then the more and more repetition you face, or the more repetition you have facing, whether it's a great defense or adversity or certain game situations, right, you continue to gain more experience, more confidence, and you get better and better. That's what we saw from Tony Romo. But the moment he started to even sniff the mountaintop, he came right back down. And I don't know, if you were to compare Tony Romo's numbers to other, even average quarterbacks, I think you'd be surprised as to how similar they are. And I think that the fact he played for the Dallas Cowboys, right? You get close enough to that magic. You rub shoulders with Jerry Jones and Troy Aikman and Emmitt Smith and Michael Irvin, and all of a sudden that dust hits you, and you elevate to a whole nother orbit, right? Not in life, truly in life. You go to the front of the line at the club when you're in your 20s. You go to the best seat in the steakhouse in Dallas in your 30s, and in your 40s, or maybe still in your 30s, you get the best broadcasting job in television. And part of that is because Romo did a great job his first year, but a lot of that, and I'm not breaking any news to anybody, was, hey, this is a guy who just played in the NFL a year or two ago. He clearly is able to identify these defenses, these looks, and had great insight because he's 300 days removed from being in meeting rooms, picking apart these defenses and then trying to do it on the field. And you hear it, and I've heard it from good sources, really, that Tony Romo, his work ethic maybe leaves a little to be desired, which doesn't shock me, and it doesn't really upset me. You have to understand, Tony Romo, he probably does not approach that job with the same vigor he approached being quarterback of the Cowboys. And I think in the later stages of his career, I'm not saying the guy didn't compete his ass off, but I will say he probably wasn't the hardest working guy in the building. And you need your quarterback to be that guy if you're going to win a Super Bowl. You need your best player to be the hardest worker if you're going to reach that mountaintop and stick around, right? So this really isn't on Tony Romo, especially when you look at his TV career. CBS, his agent, whoever else, tapped him and said, hey, you said you wanted to be a broadcaster. We're going to put you in a position where you're going to be in the focal point of sports media, of broadcasting, Super Bowls, the whole deal. At the end of the day, people vote with their remote controls, and you can get 20-somethings on Twitter losing their minds, but it really doesn't matter. The ratings are still beyond amazing. And Tony Romo had a bad game. And so you could say, right, look, I know this profession. Jim Nantz, there was a guy Small, I think is the kicker for the Jaguars. He kicked a field goal, and as Nantz says he's kicking the field goal, he mistakenly calls this guy Small Washington, right? Honestly, man, that's you don't ever want that to happen as a broadcaster, but humanity shines through. And from Pat Summerall to Vern Lundquist to Dick Stockton to Al Michaels to Jim Nantz, that happens. And it happens over and over. hopefully not all bunched up in the same season or week to week, but like those mistakes happen. But when you're in this hyperbolic chamber now with everybody climbing all over your partner, Tony Romo, now all of a sudden you get lumped in. People that are talking about, I saw people saying Jim Nantz. Jim Nantz will never be demoted off that number one team. He will retire, right? Or he will be the number one football voice at CBS. There is no other option. So you can forget about that. When you look at Romo, he's making hundreds of millions of dollars in an existing long-term deal. And okay, everybody's like J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt, J.J. Watt is now officially the backup quarterback in town for CBS, right? Oh, let's go with that guy. How many people have actually watched an entire J.J. Watt game? Like, I haven't. I know he's great so far, but that's a whole nother level of exposure. At the end of the day, we get so excited, and I love talking about this stuff, but like the average person watching the NFL playoffs they don't care. They don't. And it's not like Romo kind of botched the Open, which again happens. But when it happens in a wild card playoff game, the first game on Sunday, where literally the whole world is watching because football is that popular, people blow it out of proportion. And then Portnoy tweets about it. And then all of a sudden now everybody's sticking it to Tony Romo. Are there better analysts out there? Yeah. Troy Aikman and Chris Collinsworth. They run circles around this guy. And Aikman, just because he's intense, and I just have a man crush on Troy Aikman. He and Joe Buck, if it were up to me, we would clone them and they will call every game, right? But that's just we can't do that. Chris Collinsworth is second. And when you look at Chris Collinsworth now, remember, he oversees, or I don't know if he sold it and doesn't oversee it anymore, but the whole time he's been a color analyst pretty much, at least over the last decade or so, he's been running Pro Football Focus. That's like the Bible for football nerds. And anybody who wants to talk about football like me, and you want to make a comment about a player, you best look at Pro Football Focus before you get going, right? Because that is going to give you credibility. It's also going to give you guidance as to where you're going. So the Romo thing, again, the Cowboys have gotten us again. If Tony Romo had played for the New Orleans Saints, he wouldn't be in our lives. He'd be playing golf somewhere. He'd be living a great life. But he played for the Cowboys. So for whatever reason, we've anointed him, right, the king of the quarterback club and the number one analyst in all the land. At the end of the day, Tony Romo went on a double date with Matt Mosley. Like, how important can the guy be? Like, that's that. I always go back to that. Like, we went on a double date with Mosley. Either he's really humble or he might just be average. I think the second one could be the one we go with. All right, Cam, we got like 2 minutes. Hold on. We're going to save the Chuck Swirsky stuff, all right? Should we save it?
We can save it. I got it. It'll still be hot.
Okay. Let's do it real quick. I got to be done in like 6 minutes, but let's do this real quick. All right, so I'm going to set this up for you. When I was working in the NBA, the Toronto Raptors had a TV guy named Chuck Swirsky. And I remember Chuck did his radio show at the Charlotte Coliseum during a shoot-around. And in between, Chuck got up from the table in the Charlotte Coliseum, and somebody stole his computer, right? Which was like the nerve. This is 2004, and he's running a radio show from his computer. So it had to be like a big deal or expensive. Somebody, we would assume, one of the workers at the Charlotte Coliseum just ripped it off, right? Hey, man, you leave stuff out long enough, it'll grow legs. Swirsky was so crazy about this computer that I either thought he's got stuff on there that makes him a felon, or he's really overdoing this whole thing. Like, your computer got ripped off. It was a lot. And as a PR guy for the team, he kept coming to me and my boss, BJ Evans, and was like, where's my computer? It was like, dude, we can't find it. We don't know. So that was kind of a pain in the ass. Then years later, a really good friend of mine ended up getting his job on Raptors television. And my really good friend was calling college football games for Fox. And my friend and myself noticed, my friend didn't, that Chuck Swirsky was tweeting negatively about my friend who took his job in Toronto about his ability to call college football games, like live during the game. And he was also taking shots at my friend's color analyst, a college football coach who I can promise has forgotten more about the game of football and life than Chuck Swirsky has, okay? So I had this idea, like maybe this Swirsky guy is kind of a jackwagon, you know? But I didn't really follow up on it. I've seen him many times since. He's now the Chicago Bulls radio guy. You know, you meet him, he's so nice, shakes your hand, whatever. But then yesterday on Twitter, okay, Silverman and Waddle, they have a radio show in Chicago. And I came across this clip. And I got to tell you, this guy put Chuck Swirsky in a body bag, and I want to play it for you right now. Cam, you got it? We got 2 clips. Let's play the first one.
Put him on the station. He is a guy that will shake your hand and stab you in the back. He is one of the worst people out there. And for Chuck Swirsky to think that anybody cares about what he thinks about Ben Johnson swearing in a victorious locker room, it's absolutely ridiculous. Chuck Swirsky is another guy who will never call out Jerry Reinsdorf. He will continually kiss his ass. He'd rather lose 60 games a year as the announcer of the Bulls than care about what Ben Johnson is doing with a win. That guy is awful. He's a bad dude, and he's not good at his job. I finally.
Let's get the second one, Cam.
He would shake my hand and stab me in the back. I've experienced it. I would see him at Bulls games is what he'd do. And then a day later, he was going up to Jerry Reinsdorf showing what the mean tweets that people were saying about the Bulls. What a rat. What a bad person. And I hope you give him hell. I really do. There are not many people in this business that I don't like. I care about my relationships. That is one of the worst guys. My wife told me, do not address this. Do not bring this up. He doesn't deserve your time. I don't know how to fight without.
So I want to leave you with this one thing that Swirsky did, according to Silverman, who we just saw talking there. In 2009, when Chuck was back in Chicago, he had left the Raptors, and he's calling radio for the Bulls. A bunch of guys, a host of an afternoon drive show got canned, and Swirsky was right on the horn with the guy's boss, the general manager, saying, "Hey, you need to get me in his seat, and you need to get rid of the other 2 guys on the show right now." Okay, this is according to several people. You need me to take over that radio show. And then Bill Wennington, anybody that knows him from NBA circles, won a championship with the Bulls, played at St. John's, obviously, remember that. Wennington would go on that ESPN radio show to talk about the Bulls, because I think Wennington was either their TV analyst, or I think he worked with Chuck for a little while as a radio analyst. And Swirsky would call the station and complain, "Why are you having Bill Wennington on instead of me?" So this is like, you see it here, and I've heard all this stuff differently. So when I saw that guy who clearly has an axe to grind, right? But also I was like, wow, Swirsky just got annihilated, and maybe it's about time. I don't want to get too involved in this stuff because, again, I see Chuck Swirsky. He shakes my hand and whatever, but I'm sure he went the other way that day in 2004 and was saying all kinds of stuff about – actually, maybe I heard that. So maybe I've got some skin in the game too, that he was speaking awfully about me and my PR brethren there, BJ Evans, back in 2004. So, hey, sometimes you get yours.